The most common question I get is, when can I go home? And I said, well, your baby's in the driver's seat. So they're going to tell us, and we can give you an idea. We can say, okay, maybe it's going to be 3 days, maybe it's going to be a week. But guess what? If they're not eating and they're too tired and they need more time, or they're still on respiratory support and they need a little more time, or something pops up, you just never know. And the baby's in the driver's seat, and that's okay. And I think to allow that process, I think it's almost like the idea of letting go a little bit, control the things you can, of course, and try and be as diligent as you can in every way, but then also allow the opportunity for it to not be a perfect process, and that's okay too. And don't compare yourself to, Barbara or Debbie or whoever down the street. It's your own process with your own baby and your own journey, and it's beautiful in its own way. And I think that that's another thing for any moms who are currently in the NICU. You are definitely not alone.
Giving birth is one of the most significant events of your life. Sadly, the joy that you should feel can often be replaced with anxiety and helplessness instead. As a labor and delivery nurse, I'm revealing insider information to educate you, reassure you, and decrease your fear. In this podcast, you'll hear empowering birth stories and experts weigh in on a range of topics. Being Jewish also has me exploring Judaism's influence on the reproductive experience. However, I speak to anyone wishing to navigate their journey with more joy and confidence. I'm your host, Chani Fingerer, and you're listening to the Happy Birthway Podcast. Welcome to the 38th episode of the Happy Birthway Podcast. I hope that you missed me as much as I missed you last week. I know I've been a little bit behind on my podcasting game, and in part it's because this is a sole project of me. I record all of these episodes on my own. I create the artwork on my own. I write the show notes on my own. I upload it to the podcasting platform on my own. And I am realizing that I have a need to outsource a little bit. So when the time comes, I will let you all know when I'm looking for somebody. And if you're a new mother or an expectant mother or a mother that's not so new, but that has children with so many demands, think about outsourcing if that will make your life a little bit more manageable. You're not a bad mother for doing that. You're not spoiled. You're not selfish, because you want to enjoy these mothering moments. You want to enjoy these fleeting days and weeks and months and years. And if you're constantly overwhelmed trying to get everything off of your to-do list, then you may miss out. So instead of running yourself ragged, see if you can outsource a little bit, see if you can cut some things that may not be 100% necessary for you to be doing, in order to free yourself up to enjoy the other little sweet moments with your children, with your babies, or just be able to live a sane life if you're pregnant and really feeling unwell. This week, I have a really exciting, amazing guest on my podcast. Her name is Tori Meskin, and I found her, of course, as I found many of my guests, on Instagram. She is a NICU nurse that I have so much respect for. She's so knowledgeable. She does such a fantastic job educating new parents, and she also is like a nurse mentor and does a lot of work with support for new nurses, for nursing students, for new NICU nurses. She's just all around a great human being that I've learned from so much. She's got a great social media presence, so if you are on Instagram, look her up. I'm going to put her info in the show notes, and she will let us know how to reach her as well. Once again, I need to always thank all of you for the reviews and the ratings that you put out there. I've gotten some beautiful reviews that really touched my heart recently, so thank you for that. And I do see the ratings are going up on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, and it really, really, really means the world to me. If you review or have reviewed the podcast on Apple Podcasts, then please send me a screenshot, email it to me at chani@yoleditacademy.com, and I will give you either 3 free months of membership, 90 free days of membership to Yoledet community, or 20% off of my After the Birth course. And stay tuned. Look out for another new course coming your way, along with a guide. And that's why I kind of been a little bit behind on my podcast releases, but I have some really phenomenal ones coming out soon. For those of you who are celebrating Purim, it is happening in just 2 days. I wish you a Freilichen Purim, a happy Purim, and I hope that you enjoy what could be a very hectic day. And I hope that you stay sane, because sometimes it can be an insane day. And so without further ado, I present to you Tori Meskin. I am so honored to be interviewing Tori. I found her on Instagram. She's got an enormous following. She is a NICU nurse and does like an incredible job, A, talking about NICU stuff, and B, really providing information and mentorship to nurses, future nurses. And she's got an amazing podcast, the Selfie Podcast. I highly recommend. And like, Tori, I just love how you synthesize the fun girl stuff and like the basic girl and, vanity stuff.
We were just talking off the camera about that. And first of all, thank you for the introduction. That was so sweet of you. Likewise, I'm absolutely obsessed with everything that you're doing. I feel like everyone here in the social media space, it's just been so fun to meet everyone and get to know each other and share information and have conversations like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, social media is a lovely, amazing thing.
Yes.
So, Tori, can you just give us a little bit more of a formal introduction? Yeah. Tell us about yourself, all the stuff that you do.
Yeah, all the goodies. Okay, going back, I graduated from University of Arizona. Bear down for any of my Wildcats out there. I graduated in 2012 with my nursing degree, and then I obtained my first position in a children's hospital in Southern California in a level 4 NICU. So it's kind of funny because one of the questions I'll always get is like, did you know you wanted to be a NICU nurse? And I knew that I did not want to do adults. That was like my...
You didn't want to do geriatrics.
Exactly. I was like, the adults are not my thing. I did not want to do geriatrics. I didn't want to do adult ICU. Like, that was not my thing. But peds, and specifically the neonates, definitely interested me. And I actually applied to my residency program out of strategy because they were hiring the most amount of new grads. And so I applied, and here I am, fast forward 9 years later, and I've been a NICU nurse bedside for 9 years. I'm in grad school currently. I have a podcast, a blog, and Instagram. So it's been a wild ride.
And you're in grad school. I didn't know that part. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's really intense. And a level 4 NICU, firstly, I want to explain to our listeners what that is, but that's also amazing that you got into the NICU as a grad nurse, which I actually believe in, because I got right into labor and delivery because I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And like you said, doing geriatrics wasn't exactly going to contribute much to my...
wasn't for us. For us. Right, absolutely.
Yeah. And I would love for you to explain to our listeners what the difference is between something like a level 4 NICU versus not. And also, just out of curiosity, what kind of graduate degree are you pursuing?
Yeah, great questions. Okay, so the first one being levels of NICU. This is something I always really love to educate future moms and moms on who are going to go through the birth process, because not everyone is aware of this. So there's 4 levels. There's level 1, 2, 3, 4. The level 1 being the lowest level, being your nursery, if you will, all the way up to level 4, which are your children's hospitals, your university centers, your consult centers, where you're providing life-saving surgeries. We have the smallest, tiniest patients, the youngest ones up to about 23 weeks. Life-saving procedures such as ECMO, doing surgery, cardiac surgery, neurosurgery, GI surgery. So it's pretty extensive in terms of how different NICUs can be. I would say most hospitals offer a level 2 or a level 3 NICU. The level 4 NICUs tend to be, a little bit more in the metropolitan areas, or there will be one big hospital in a rural area where, they'd have possibly a level 4 there. But yes, that's a great aspect to explain to moms, because sometimes what will happen is we will have patients who will, be transferred to us from rural areas, and it does cause for a really interesting dynamic for moms and babies. And then in terms of grad school, so I'm actually getting my my MSN in leadership, nurse leadership right now, just because I'm realizing my passion for being a leader in the nurse space. Specifically, I don't know if I'm going to be using it so much at the bedside, more for in terms of maybe sitting on a board or contributing to research or doing things like publicizing a book. I'm very interested in maybe writing a book one day, just things that down the line that I think would really open the opportunity in the nurse leadership world. And there's a lot happening for us here in the social media and media space. And I think it's really important for us to have that presence. So.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yes, you are already a leader, a nurse leader, through social media and all of that. You're an influencer too. Like, you have good style. But
such a cringy word, isn't it? I'm like, ugh.
It is. I don't know what nurse influencer. I don't know. But
yeah.
Listen, you, like I said, you synthesize like the style, vanity aspect of it too. I love it. Because you're both intelligent and you got a great lifestyle.
You. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and so going back to the levels of NICU, and level 2 and 3 being kind of like, depending on gestational age, like, 28 weeks or a little bit more, I think that it's really important to emphasize that whatever level a NICU is that's like the endpoint of labor and delivery. So I'm a labor and delivery nurse, and I worked at Yale, which is a level 4 NICU, and then I worked in smaller community hospitals, which are kind of like level 3-ish units. And if there was a mom that developed any complications during her pregnancy, or if she, has an ultrasound that detects possible abnormalities in her fetus, then she may be recommended to actually transfer out of the original hospital that she was planning on giving birth at to a level 4 NICU. So it's kind of like it's interrelated, where the level of NICU is going to correlate with the level of risk that labor and delivery patients that are giving birth will be at. So if somebody is in preterm labor, if it's like really early on, they're likely going to be recommended to go to, let's say, a level 4 NICU.
Yeah, right.
And you literally deal with the tiniest, microest humans in this world. And as a labor and delivery nurse, oh my gosh, like I applaud you, because when we have those tiny little micro babies, full-term babies, I'm fine with, even like about 34 weeks. But oh my gosh, when those micro little babies come out, I'm just so grateful when that neonatal team shows up.
It's so interesting. Yeah. And it's so funny because much like you probably get this question often too, is, should I go into labor and delivery or should I go into NICU? And, I always tell them, I'm like, really focus on the patient care directly, because you, for example, primarily are working with moms, right? And for me, I'm primarily working with baby. So it's very interesting because it's so different what we do. And I have mad respect for what you do, because I could never do what you do. I'm like, I'm going to need all the tips here. Hopefully in a couple of years, I'll be like, I'm going to be calling you up being like, okay, what do I do for this? What do I do for that? What positions? What all things do I need? So yeah. Yeah, but the level of NICU is very pertinent. I would say that's definitely an ideal world when we know, in utero that something has happened, so a baby is pre-diagnosed with a cardiac anomaly, or, we have a mom who comes in high risk and they say, okay, she would be better to deliver somewhere else. That's ideal. But oftentimes, moms will go into labor and, have the baby and you have an undiagnosed situation, or, where you're going to be transferring the baby out, or you have a traumatic birth where, we would need to start what we call body cooling to help the baby after birth, and then they would get transferred to a center. So there's a lot of different situations, and it's so funny because I know you know this as well. It's such a weird world to be in as a NICU nurse, speaking out or, educating and presenting what we do on social media, because personally, I feel like it's very triggering what I do, right? Like, I feel like I work in the most taboo area of the world, where you have a new baby who comes into the world, and they're thrust into this completely foreign place. Not only the parents, oftentimes are first-time parents, they don't know, the head from the bottom, but they also are struggling with, okay, here's my baby, and we're in an isolette, and we've got all these wires and these tubes, and we're on potentially life-saving support or respiratory support. We're starting all these medications, we're starting these fluids, we're doing all these crazy things, and it's so weird because it's that balance of I want to share what I do and I love what I do, but it's also very triggering, and it's also something where I want to be sensitive to the moms out there, and you don't want to over stress someone out, especially who's going through the birth process. But it's also that level of education of saying, okay, look, we're going to have a baby. And this is how I think of it, right? The way I think of it is you don't get onto an airplane without the what to do in case of emergency, right? So for me, it's more of like, okay, so let's say you do end up in that situation. You have a little bit of knowledge, you have a little bit of understanding of what we do. And, you have a great team there to support you. We all love what we do in the NICU. So but it is a delicate balance of trying not to be the complete trigger warning and triggering on, and education, but also, being able to share what I do and being able to kind of highlight the amazingness of what we do in the NICU.
Yeah. And I can relate to that as well, because labor and delivery is intense in many ways.
Yeah.
It's happy and it's joyful, and it's also intense, and stuff, like you said, stuff can go not as planned, and
absolutely,
it's also finding that delicate balance of what's TMI, what's too much information that's just going to alarm people, and then you also have the moms that are experiencing some pregnancy complications, and sometimes they can feel isolated because they don't have the education out there, because these childbirth education courses, most of them gloss over these kinds of things. They don't want to alarm moms, and there's no online course specifically for someone who has preeclampsia.
Right. I mean, that's a great point. And the other thing, too, is also, from my end, statistically, 1 in 9 babies is born prematurely, which is a crazy statistic.
Wow.
1
That's
in
more
9.
Than 10%.
That is insane. And it is not something that we prepare moms for. And we don't, and just so all the moms know, because we don't know a lot of why this is happening. Is it because we're having babies later? Is it because moms are more stressed in their job situations? Is it because, we don't have moms don't have access to X, Y, and Z nutrition? Or maybe, it's just, we have no idea. These things are just happening. And it's interesting because there is a lot of studies going on about that. And in terms of maternal care, I feel like there's a really big push from the OB and also midwife, nurse practitioner, NICU community to really improve what's going on for maternal care, because I think for the last, our maternal care is, it's tough. It's our outcomes are awful. Yeah,
in the U.S.
In the U.S.
We come out number 27 last time I checked.
Yes, it's horrible.
Which is, yes, absolutely.
And, we're not, I think, we're missing the mark in certain things. And so I think the push from us and our new generation, I think, is to really start making changes and waves to make those things better. But it is something. I'm 1 in 9, and that's just prematurity. That doesn't include the things that I see in terms of, the cardiac diagnoses, the, undiagnosed, whatever, X, Y, and Z situations that happen. So, it's definitely something I think it's, and I love sharing what I do. I really do. And I love what I do. So, yeah.
And I have to say, so going back to how I said, the moms that have the complications, when I occasionally talk about that, I get a lot of messages thanking me for bringing those things up because they feel isolated. So I think you play an important role in that as well, because I have so many moms off the cuff just message me about their NICU baby and how nobody talks about their NICU baby, and telling me these really intense stories of how much they struggled. They had other kids at home and they felt like they had to go to work 2 weeks after they gave birth because they were saving up their time to take off after their baby came home from the NICU. In the meantime, they were working. They still hadn't recovered from birth. And
that's my life. I'm all of you moms, all of you NICU moms, come on over. This is my place. I'm like, I love you guys.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel you. I did a post a while back. It was a Reels that I posted. And, do you know the guy in New York who he holds up the sign that says something just like, please stop doing XYZ. And he's holding up the cardboard box, like the cardboard sign in New York or whatever. And he's become infamous. Guy with a sign. Okay. Anyway, I did a guy with the sign style thing where it said, not every mom is able to skin right after birth or something like that. It was something to that effect. And then it was a little like blip about NICU life, and the outpour from moms of just saying like, thank you for saying that, because, and I could feel it from all these women who are just in tears, because here we are, we're pushing, skin to skin, skin to skin, skin to skin, and then also breastfeed. And so many moms, I mean, I deal with them. 100% of the moms that I see are the moms that are in these situations that aren't able to do these things with their babies right away. And they have this, such a tearing feeling in their heart. And I just want to tell them, I'm like, it's okay. It's your baby. We're taking good care of your baby. You're going to have your time. We promise. We're going to make it happen. But it just breaks my heart for those moms who, it's such a weird place to be in terms of wanting to support those moms. And I'm like, I'm here for you. I hear you, all of you NICU moms, you go through a lot. I get emotional about it because I'm like, hopefully one day when I'm a mom, I won't be in that situation, but very well, I know I could be. Here I am. I'm 33 and I'm waiting to have kids. I haven't had kids yet, and I could be that mom. So, yeah.
Yeah, you, NICU guys, you're so instrumental in providing support to families, and differently from labor and delivery, you create a bond with these families over a long period of time. Some of these babies are in the NICU for, 12, 14 weeks. I don't know what the longest, you've had.
The longest I've had is up to a year. Our cap is really a year, and that's not the norm, to be honest. But for those of us who work in children's hospitals, university centers, where we have babies with extremely complex surgeries and, long-term diagnoses, CDH. We have a lot of babies with diaphragmatic hernia. We have babies with GI issues who require several surgeries and ostomies and whatever. So the long story short is up to a year. But the typical, I would say, is anything up from, it's a couple days all the way up to months, depending on in terms of prematurity. Sometimes we'll have babies with us for months up until close to their due date. So yeah, I mean, I do think that we bond with our parents, specifically the parents, and of course the babies as well, but more than I think a lot of units, just by nature of the patient care that we're giving, and also, the length of stay. But it's also a very sensitive time. And the irony is these relationships that we have built become some of the strongest relationships. I mean, we're not supposed to say this, but I'm going to say it on the record. A lot of us NICU nurses will go to our patients' birthdays, years and years and years later, and get to see them. Like my oldest patient that I had, she's now 7 years old. And It's just so crazy because I'm like, I grew you from a little tiny peanut. And it's so special. And I love that. It's such a very, very, very special bond that we get to do. So
it really is. I hear parents all the time so effusive about that enormous connection that they have with, you're like the caretakers of their baby. Like you literally, and you teach them everything, and you see the milestones that their baby meets. It's so emotional. I think that you really have a special bond. Patients will tell me all the time when they had a great labor and delivery staff how grateful they are. But I think with NICU, it's even more so. They're just really, they get to know you, and you teach them everything. And sometimes you take their little baby where they're so scared they don't even know if the baby's going to make it, and then you help them grow their baby. You're like half a uterus for them,
Yeah. No, it's a great point. Absolutely. Machines can do so much, it's the bonding, and, we're teaching the other aspects of it on top of obviously giving the care, but, really guiding these guiding parents through this situation is so unique and special. And I would say it is emotional, but I will say this, in terms of being a NICU nurse, we get that comment a lot, of like how hard it must be or how emotional it must be. And it's interesting because I would think that most NICU nurses would agree with me on this. You learn to put it away, right? It's like you learn to, in critical situations, you're going to the DR, you're going to grab the baby from the OR, you're stabilizing, you're doing all these things, you're throwing in lines, you're doing all these, you're resuscitating, you're doing NRP, you kind of just like go, do, and you kind of thrive on adrenaline, and doing all of these crazy life-saving procedures that we're doing, and you just do it. And it's something where then you get a moment to kind of have that moment with the parent and, really kind of help guide them through what's happening. I think in my personal opinion, I've had a handful of times where I've gotten super, super emotional, but it's our job, right? It's like that balance of like, it's our job. And obviously, you get emotional about it, but it's also something where, we're working in micro deciliters and we're working in very tiny. We have so little room for error. So your attention to detail has to be so keen and so, on point.
Yeah, so precise. And you can't,
right.
It's really that balance of holding space and having that emotion and the compassion, and then being able to balance it with you. Yes. You can't let it take you over when you're thinking about all the things that you have to do. And I'm sure it's similar to what I experienced in labor and delivery, where it's like a very well choreographed dance where, especially in the beginning, like you said, you go to the DR, the delivery room, or the OR, the operating room, and like you kind of already, and for our listeners that are completely not in the medical field, part of receiving a baby that's born is you get like a full report on everything that's been going on, the full history of the mom. So a lot of things to be prepared for, and a lot of the steps initially are kind of the same. So it's a well choreographed dance. It looks like chaos, but in reality, it's very.
Oh yeah. It's so funny. I just think about like, okay, for example, I'm walking into the OR. You'd be over on my right at the computer, prepping mom, doing all this. And then I'd go straight to the giraffe. I know exactly. We're turning on the warmer. We're turning on, it literally is that's what it is. It's a choreographed dance. And we know exactly where we go and what we're doing. And yeah, that's a good way to put it for sure.
Yeah, it looks chaotic, but
it looks chaotic.
but we got all of our moves. Yeah. So let me ask you, can you tell our moms, like parents, what are the most common NICU admissions that you see? What are common NICU admissions that are like unexpected, and those that are expected? Obviously something like a preemie, whether, someone's expecting that they may go into preterm labor and they have some time to process that, or if it's just sudden. But what are other, we have full term, I can tell you the things that I see, like with full term babies.
Sure. You and I already know what we're going to say.
Yeah.
I would say the most common diagnosis, the most, let's say term baby, everything's fine. Typically what we'll see is maybe an hour or two after birth in nursery or with mom, they're having a little RDS, grunting, neonatal grunting. So I would say respiratory is probably one of our most common admissions, respiratory distress syndrome. Typically, I would say that just from the fact of like, okay, let's say it's a term baby. And for moms who are listening, the lungs are the last organ to develop. So the lungs are the ones that take the longest to develop. They're the most sensitive. And typically when babies come out, respiratory distress is like number one. That is our issue that we always anticipate could be the issue. So I would say, the babies who go over, they have a little bit of issues with transitioning and they need a little respiratory support. So then they come over to the NICU. That's my experience. I would also say jaundice related to breastfeeding or lack of breastfeeding supply. I think that's another thing in terms of for parents who are kind of preparing. Breastfeeding is a really tough thing to start and initiate and get really successful. We don't have nearly enough support for moms out there. And the reason I'm saying that is because there are a lot of of really wonderful consults or private practice consults coming out and a lot more support for it. However, we used to live in clans, right? We used to live in these areas where mothers would have these babies and grandma would be there, auntie would be there, your sister would be there who's had a baby. And yes, a nuclear model. They had so much support, and God forbid something didn't happen, you had all these amazing support systems. Well, that's not the case anymore. And so these moms are having I just see this whole generation of moms that are just having such a hard time with breastfeeding and getting started, and consequently what will happen is we have admission to the NICU for babies who are dehydrated, because whatever it may be, they were able to get a good suck, or the latch wasn't good, or maybe they have a tongue tie and mom wasn't aware of it, and so then the baby's pinching the nipple and not getting a good latch, or maybe mom's supply isn't coming in as much, and they're just not familiar with, okay, you can start pumping and start getting that supply going if you needed to. There's just a lot of different tricks and tips that we use, at least in the NICU. So that's another admission that we'll see is hyperbilies essentially. And so you need to hydrate and get, babies fed, or we'll supplement a little bit and then help moms kind of get their supply going again. And then onwards they go. I would say those are the most common that I see.
It's so sad that people have that. Like, in my personal practice, as soon as I see any issue, it's like, let's go straight to the pump. Let's do hand expression. Let's go to the pump. Like, let's try to nip this in the bud before it turns into something like, hyperbilirubinemia.
We all can't say
jaundice,
it.
Yeah.
Jaundice.
We call them phototherapy babies. But and for those who just want to understand quickly, the bilirubin is just stuff that's circulating in the baby. The baby's liver can't clear it out as fast. Yep. And so it accumulates.
They basically
in the
get
baby.
Dehydrated.
Right, exactly. When the baby has enough, fluid going in them, then they're peeing and pooping out the bilirubin better. So. Right. And, there are risk factors for that, too. So I find it so sad, because I was actually just right now talking about it on Instagram, and people were telling me, like, I didn't know that. So they're like, in all my entire stay in the hospital, my baby was having issues. Nobody gave me a pump. Like, nobody taught me hand expression.
Yeah, see, and it's crazy to me. It's crazy to me, too, because, and I get it from the lactation standpoint for all the specialists out there. I understand wanting to do things as naturally as possible and whatnot, but I see way too many situations, at least for me in the NICU, where it
goes to the extreme.
Yeah, you got to throw everything at these situations to help mom keep her supply and just support the situation. And in terms of getting the supplies going, it's so interesting because, the other thing that we will see in terms of diagnosis and babies is infants of diabetic mothers. That's very common right now. For anyone who does have gestational diabetes, it happens quite often. The issue that we see is when it's not managed well. So, if it's not caught on early and it's not managed by mama at home in terms of whatever it is, insulin or lifestyle changes or whatever, it's an insulin, it has to do with your hormone level reuptake or the increased level of because you have increased blood and increased hormones, and then something has to do with the insulin receptors where they don't uptake, they block the action, so basically your sugars in your blood go up. So it happens, right? This is just something that happens. So the issue that we see is if moms are not managing at home, and then babies of infant of diabetic mothers, they come in, and when babies are born, then all of a sudden their sugars will drop significantly. They'll end up with us in the NICU for management. And then also another one, preeclampsia, of course. We'll have a lot of babies born moderately premature. I would say, typically we see like 34, 35, 36 weeks.
Because usually the onset of preeclampsia happens after 28 weeks, like in severe cases 24. Right. And going back to the gestational diabetes, the way I like to explain it to my patients is that if your blood sugars are high consistently or even just in labor, then your baby is producing a lot of extra insulin to control those blood sugars. So now when your baby's born, that's what they're used to producing. So they're going to produce too much insulin, and as a result, their blood sugars can drop.
drops really. And
because when parents hear that they have diabetes and now their kid has to get checked for blood sugars, they just automatically assume it's the same thing for an adult. They have to get checked for blood sugars because they're afraid that their blood sugars are going to be too high. But actually the concern is blood sugars not being too low. And why it's so critical to make sure that your baby's blood sugars are stable is because the brain functions off of glucose, off of sugar. And actually what I do for any parent whose baby is on blood sugars, because there are other reasons why a baby would need routine blood sugars checked and why they'd be at risk of low blood sugar, I hand express, manual expression, ASAP. As soon as that baby's out, I do manual breast expression for the mom, which not only does it help your milk come in faster, but I squeeze as much milk colostrum as I can into that baby's mouth, even if they're not latching, even if they are latching. And I really have found in my personal practice that it helps keep those babies' blood sugar stable.
Yeah, I would say that's actually that's a great tip, and I love that, absolutely. I would say, in terms of brain, so in terms of NICU, one of the biggest things that we obviously want to protect the most is the brain, and sugars is one, and then the other thing being oxygen, which is why respiratory support is respiratory is another big admission for us over in the NICU. It's definitely, I don't know, and I think that our lactation support is getting significantly better, but it's so interesting because, I'll often talk to moms who have taken classes prior to having baby. And I do think the base is really good, but when you're putting it into practice, it's so different. And I find that it's so hard. A lot of moms are having a lot of time struggling. So if you're someone that struggled with it or had a hard time, trust me, you are not alone. Like, every single day at work when I go in, unless it's a mom who's had a baby, like this is her third baby and she's done this a million times and her supply comes in right away and she's just, that does happen as well. But typically for first time moms, it's so difficult because you think, oh, baby's going to come out and they're going to latch right away. It's be perfect and they're going to get it. Like, no, it's actually, eating is a learned skill for babies. And I think that's another thing that is a big sort of misnomer, or maybe people not, familiar with, is for babies, they have to build up the endurance to eat, even using those muscles, the mouth muscles. It's a lot of work for them. And so it takes a lot of time to really coordinate between having mom and the nipple shape and making sure the baby's getting a good latch. And so it does take time to get used to. And I think that
suck swallow coordination, learning how to coordinate those two things.
Right.
Yeah. It's like a sport.
It's a sport. It's a workout. We tell moms literally in the NICU, we're like, basically babies learning to eat is like running a marathon. Like that's literally what it is, because they're burning calories as they're eating, and it's a learned sport. It's a skill. So once they get it down, but it takes a little time.
Yeah, that's why sometimes bottles are important for those
babies.
Supplement. Because they're burning through their calories.
Best.
They're burning through the... You know what I like to say? Breast is not best, fed is not best, supported is best, really.
Supported is best.
And when you want to breastfeed and you want to exclusively breastfeed, I think that sometimes well-intentioned staff will just throw a bottle at the mom when it's not working out and just saying, fed is best. But really, if she really desires not to give her baby formula, then first we have to go
through everything,
get
the pump out,
to support her, not so that she doesn't feel dismissed.
Yeah,
exactly.
For sure.
And if a mom wants to exclusively formula feed right from the get-go, we have to support that too, let go of any ridiculous shaming. And
absolutely, I am a big advocate for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, let's reveal the little secrets. I mean, between me and you, it's makes our workflow a lot easier. Don't tell anyone. No, but meaning to say, especially when we have a baby that has some kind of risk thing, like with the blood sugars, and the mom's like, no, I want a formula feed. Inside we're like, oh,
Thank you.
That's going to be nice. That's going to be nice.
Yes.
Although, of course, I'll do everything to support a mom that wants to breastfeed.
Yeah, we don't dismiss that. But, especially for us in the NICU, usually typically when they're coming to us, the situation is so, in a situation like, let's say you get a blood sugar of 13 or 20 something. You're like, okay, we are definitely in a situation where it's not an option to do the extremes, right? It's like you have to do something. So, I will say this too, in terms of for moms and future parents out there, I am definitely someone that loves leveling with parents and saying, I love the open conversations. And I think from a provider standpoint, it's so much easier when parents have they say, okay, this is what I would prefer, this is what I would like, but if you need to do this, absolutely. And I think that's, from a provider standpoint, like truly collaborating, it makes for a really, really successful journey for both mom and baby.
Yeah. It's that
And
family
that comes after
care.
education.
Yeah, it's that family-centered
exactly.
care. And going back to the support piece, so, if they want to breastfeed, go all the way, do whatever you can, until it becomes unsafe. If they want to formula feed, go, give them that bottle, and don't try to convince them otherwise. And then if the breastfeeding doesn't work out, and if they need to supplement because for example, their baby's in the NICU, I mean, it wouldn't be safe for them to just breastfeed. And I think that's a lot of the loss that probably a lot of moms you deal with, where especially if they weren't expecting their baby to land up in the NICU, that this is not your normal newborn. They need extra support, which may include, do you guys do donor milk? We started doing donor milk in one of my hospitals.
Yeah. So in terms of prematurity, right? So our little tinies who, we're talking 24, 25, 26, up to probably about 30 weeks, actually cannot get formula. And some NICUs may be still doing this practice, but most NICUs have converted over to using donor milk. And the reason for that is that formula has been found to be a high risk for necrotizing enterocolitis, which is a big issue for us in the NICU.
Which is basically a GI infection. It's an infection in the intestines of a newborn.
Yeah, and then could cause a perforation. And it's something that we are very, very, very
mindful of,
heightened and attuned to, because it's something that happens very quickly, and when it does, typically the outcomes are not good. If a baby perfs and if you're unable to catch it in time. So anyway, the long story short is that our little ones will get donor milk because it's much safer for them to consume. Typically, we wean them off of donor milk usually by 34 weeks, I would say, is the latest that a baby will be getting donor milk from the hospital setting. But we definitely do use donor milk. And if you are someone that pumps and you have a huge supply, please, please, please donate. If you can donate to a center in your local area. You can look it up. The way that they do it is you would donate your milk, and then the milk goes through a process of being tested, and it goes through, a rigorous testing, so that way we can use it for our hospital situations. So definitely, if you are a mom who produces a lot, that's wonderful, because it's a good way to give back if you can. Your baby comes first, but if you can. There's lots of moms that have it just sitting in their freezer, the extra stuff. And
this just really highlights the value of breast milk, where it's got the immunity properties, and that's with the GI system. It's really, that's why it's so important. That's why every drop, and it's not an all or nothing. And I would imagine by the time someone's baby's 34 weeks, if they had their baby a few weeks before that, then hopefully their milk supply is kind of, they have a little bit of a higher milk supply that they were able to develop to feed their baby breast milk of their own. What other messages do you think it's important for parents to know, both parents that are not anticipating a NICU stay and that end up having to have their baby in the NICU, or those that are pregnant that are maybe being told your baby has some cardiac defect or something like that, and your baby's going to need to be in the NICU? How can they prepare? And while their baby is actually in the NICU, what advice can you give them?
Yeah, so my first thing would be, so I am really a big advocate for this idea, is in terms of birth and preparing, of course, I don't think really anything can prepare you for the NICU, to be honest. It's a very unique situation for every parent, for every baby. But in terms of birth, I think I would really like to change the coined term from birth plan to birth preferences. The reality is that baby is going to come the way baby wants to come. And so meaning if you are in labor for, let's say, call 24, 36 hours, and you're at a point where baby's not doing well, then you may end up in an emergency C-section, especially if it's your first baby. You may be at home and you go into labor early, and then you just never know when baby's going to come, right? Baby's going to come the way they want to, when they do, or if they don't want to come, and then they're having issues. So there's just so many different ways that babies come. And I think just opening up the idea to, allowing your baby to sort of lead the journey. And, as a parent, of course, you're going to do everything you can to give the baby, everything you absolutely can. But it's okay if your journey isn't the way that you thought it was going to be. And I think the issue that I see is a lot of moms who are so married to the idea of having a perfect pregnancy and a perfect birth situation and perfect postpartum. And the reality is, in my experience, is at least one of those things is not going to be perfect. So just brace for it.
Well, listen, parenthood as a whole.
Parenthood
is just going to throw you for a loop. There is nothing predictable about becoming a parent. Your child,
Absolutely.
You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. You cannot imagine. And it really does require a huge dose of flexibility, like the rigidity.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, Tori, just going back to how our generation lives today, we have a lot of control over a lot of things in our lives that we used to not have control over. So I think for many people, this is a really hard adjustment because this is
the one time where you really are not in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And we tell that to parents too. We'll get that question. The most common question I get is, when can I go home? And I said, well, your baby's in the driver's seat. So they're going to tell us, and we can give you an idea. We can say, okay, maybe it's going to be 3 days, maybe it's going to be a week. But guess what? If they're not eating and they're too tired and they need more time, or they're still on respiratory support and they need a little more time, or something pops up, you just never know. And the baby's in the driver's seat, and that's okay. And I think to allow that process, I think it's almost like the idea of letting go a little bit. I think that, control the things you can, of course, and try and be as diligent as you can in every way, but then also allow the opportunity for it to not be a perfect process, and that's okay too. And don't compare yourself to, Barbara or Debbie or whoever down the street. It's your own process with your own baby and your own journey, and it's beautiful in its own way. And I think that that's another thing for any moms who are currently in the NICU. You are definitely not alone. Not to make it a selfish plug, but we do have a couple really great episodes on our podcast with some NICU moms, and then also a couple NICU dads who speak to their experiences. And
that's great.
And they speak to feeling very isolated and feeling very alone. And I know that there are also some really great Facebook groups out there. So you can I would dabble in those, I guess, with self-awareness, knowing you're going in to sort of maybe find a little community and not so much comparison, because I do think that could be also a little triggering, where it's it's a little too much information for me. Or, you go into it with some self-awareness and you say, look, I want to kind of go and know I'm not alone here. And, it's less about comparing my journey to someone else's, or to find the exact medical diagnosis on X, Y, and Z, because every situation is so different, but to find more of a community. And I feel the community in terms of NICU is very strong on Instagram. I have a really, I love my NICU people on Instagram. It's such a fun community because we're all
people too.
Yeah, thank you. But you're not alone. And I think, ultimately it's baby's journey as well. And I think becoming a parent, it's the first time, especially for parents who do end up in the NICU, it's you really are not, it's whoa, welcome to parenthood, baby's in charge. It's a really special place, and prepare for what you can and be okay with what you can't.
Yeah, you guys are superhumans. NICU staff is just incredible, so compassionate and so
Thanks, Jamie.
loving. Like there's
Thank
something
you.
so mushy and yummy about like a whole group of people that
We're
are
also I would say strict coaches. There's times where we have to be a little hard and we say, okay, it's coach time. Like if you got to eat, you got to eat. You got to wake up, and there's times to kind of buck up here, little guy. So I think there's that balance, right? Of like we know when to do the extra TLC, and we know when they need a little extra push, and they're being a little, their baby selves. So
oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a great. You learn to speak baby really quickly in the NICU.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. And I just wanted to bring up, this just came to mind. Like I've had parents tell me that they've gotten such invalidating comments from people who have absolutely no idea about the NICU world. Like moms who have been told how they should enjoy these weeks of where their baby is in the hospital getting taken care of by someone else so that they can sleep while they're basically pumping and running back and forth to the NICU, and like that's their whole life.
I can't with that. Like the toxic positivity. Please do not throw that at parents.
Even the ignorance. Even it's like ignorance, like where people are just so stupid. Like, don't be jealous.
Yeah.
Don't be jealous that my baby's in the NICU and that I can get to sleep for a few weeks, which is not necessarily true. But and just also I think that there's some awkwardness around if someone has a very sick baby when people congratulate them. Have you found that where like they just don't get the same reception, the response?
Yeah, it's sensitive, right? Because what you say to one person may not resonate with another person, right? It's like there's no rule book. I think for families who are going through that, to be quite honest, I feel like the best way to support someone isn't to say something like, how's baby doing? It's, what can I do for you? Like, can I take your car to get service? Can I gas up your car? Can I take your kids for a day? Can I do your laundry? Can I deliver food? Because typically parents in the NICU, especially for parents that are there for a long time with complex situations, they don't need a saga from other people. They don't need pity. They don't need all this. Maybe a little bit in the beginning, but honestly, they need help, and in ways that they didn't even know they needed. Hey, can I get your house cleaned? Like, can I come over? Can I clean your house? Like, that is so much more tangible and helpful to someone who's going through something. And they may not even say thank you. They may not even be in the mindset to be there. But honestly, I think just being able to step in and take over for them to some degree is always really helpful. A meal train is great. Mm-hmm. Anything you can do to support a parent being in the hospital with their child, that's really what it comes down to. And, in terms of questions, on the daily, you can tell them, like, you let me know what you are happy to share with me. Hey, how was your day today? Mm-hmm.
Or
you can take it day by day.
And
I'm thinking of you,
praying for you, and no need to reply. But people who will, if they connect to you, if you connect to someone in that way, and you say no need to reply or whatever, they'll still, if they feel safe with you and connected, they'll still tell you that. Like they'll give you the information themselves if they feel safe with you and they feel like you're truly concerned. Like just give them the control and let them initiate if they want to. I know we're coming to a close. I wanted to tell you like a recent story. My coworker, her daughter-in-law or daughter just had twins, and one of her twins, mm-hmm. I don't know, it was like 32 weeks, 34 weeks, whatever it is. One of the twins went home, and she's doing great. And her brother, on the other hand, and we know that white male boys are the biggest troublemakers. It's a true thing.
Okay, can I just say
Statistics.
it? Can I say it?
Yeah.
We call it wimpy white boy. It's a thing. It is a thing. Don't come for me. It's always the wimpy white boys that end up staying in the NICU. Okay, continue.
Yeah, no, that's the joke. Like when
that's
there's some kind of complication, and we ask like what the races of the baby and the gender, and they're like, it's a white boy. We're like, oh, it's always a white boy. Like it's got to be a boy also. So anyway, so her little brother is still in the NICU, and it's been weeks later, and the poor mom, she's got one baby at home that she's taking care of, a newborn, and then another baby.
Yeah, it's hard.
At the same time that she's got to run to in the NICU. Hard. So it's hard. And
we get a lot of situations like that too. Yeah, it's hard, when you've got another little one at home, and you're balancing so much. So don't be too hard on yourself. That's definitely, and it's not your fault. I love telling moms that too. Please, 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 please know that.
Yeah. All right. So, Tori, thank you so much for joining us. Anything else that you felt like important to know for anyone?
No, I just think, yeah, it's such a special little piece of the world. And
how can people reach you? How can people find you? You're in a million different places. Can you list all of them? And I'm going to put that in the show notes. And we didn't really talk about the support that you give to nurses, too. So I just wanted to mention that just because
Well, today's about the moms. Like, we could do the nurses later.
No, it is. But I do have a lot of nurses that listen and aspiring nurses. Yeah. So it's good for them to know that, too.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. That's at Nurse Tori. It's TORI_. My podcast, me and Sam, my co-host, it's called Selfie Podcast. It's the Selfie Podcast. It's CELLFIE_podcast. That's on Instagram. I have a website for anyone who is interested in becoming a NICU nurse. That's tipsfromtori.com. And I have a ton of resources over there for you. I have downloadables. We have report sheets. I have exclusive blog material into the insights of being a NICU nurse. I also do have, for any parents out there, if you're looking for it, I have a couple blogs specifically for NICU parents in terms of how to bond well in the NICU, some great products for you if you're looking for some things, products that I've both used at the bedside as well as things that I've had recommended by parents who've been in the NICU. We have an Amazon list as well that's linked in those blogs. So between the blog, the podcast, and Instagram, that's where you can find me. I'm also on TikTok, but it's a little more silly.
We're in our 30s, okay?
So I'm like, I'm the millennial on TikTok, thank you. But it is kind of NICU focused. I've actually had some fun little ones. So if you are on TikTok, it's at Nurse Tori as well.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, your stuff is great. I just need to know this, okay? I need to get this off my chest. How did you come up with this? Like, what is behind the name The Selfie Podcast?
Oh my God, I love that you asked me this.
I've had a burning desire to know.
Yeah, well, not everybody gets it. It's the medical people that usually get it. Okay, so back in the day when I started, it was 2019 is when I came up with the concept. And initially when I started it, I did it solo. And I did my show solo for 8 months, just for anyone who's getting the backstory here. And then my co-host came on, and we've been together a year since producing the show together. And now
you guys are such a great duo. I just love it.
We have a dynamic. It's craziness. So I wanted a name that had medical. Because the whole umbrella of our show is really medical based, but it's fun. It's very lighthearted. It's just this crazy melting pot. You never know what you're going to get. It could be a provider all the way to, we're talking sex and taboo topics and, all of the above. So the long story short is I wanted something that had sort of a medical pun. And I was looking, nothing stuck. And then all of a sudden one day I saw this cup on Etsy, and it just said selfie, and it had a little cell doing like this little selfie. And I was like, oh my God, that
so cute.
Is it. So our whole thing, and then we have a little mascot. Her name is Selena. She's our selfie mascot. So she's our cell doing a selfie. So it's the selfie show. And because Sam and I are always doing selfies, and we're here for a lot of, it's the medical twist on selfies. So yeah,
kind of combining the social stuff with the podcast.
I wanted to be fun, medical. And I wanted something iconic. I did not want the name nurse in it specifically, because I don't want it to be such a nurse show. I want it to be all encompassing. I want to bring on parents, I want providers. We want to talk anything from, sex and, taboo topics all the way to, someone's life journey. So I wanted something very general. And I also want to have PAs, MDs. I want to have surgeons. I want to have specialists, lactations. I want the whole gamut. I want the parents. I want the stories, entrepreneurs, brands. So it's open for a big brand name, and that's what I want. I wanted something that was a little bit bigger than ourselves. So,
yeah, it really serves a lot of different niches. It's great. I highly recommend it. It's so fun. I love it.
Thank you.
You guys are cray-cray. Sam more than you, but
we
you're
are.
Cray-cray.
That we are. We're batshit.
All right. Thank you again, Tori. This was such an honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning into the Happy Birthway podcast. Head over to Yoledet Academy on Instagram to continue the conversation. You'll find the link in the episode show notes, as well as links to any additional resources, products, and services mentioned here. If you love listening to this show, you can help it grow by sharing it with your friends and rating and reviewing it. To stay in the loop when new episodes are released, make sure to subscribe. Remember that your health needs are unique and require individualized medical advice. The podcast is not a replacement, and some of the information may not be appropriate for your specific circumstances. My mission is to educate you so that you can confidently collaborate with your healthcare team. I believe that a healthy mom and healthy baby are simply not enough. We also need a happy mom with an empowering birth experience.